Colonel Thorne's laughter echoed off the stone walls as he pointed at the old woman's rifle. To him, the M24 she held was a relic, a joke in the hands of grandmother in fatigues. The team smirked along, but the veteran's wrinkled hands just calmly wiped the stock, until Thorne's eyes caught a strange mark etched into the wood. Before I tell you what that mark really was, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The air inside Forward Operating Base Griffin was thick with ozone and tension. Staff Sergeant Eleanor Vance, Ellie, to the few who knew her, stepped into the harsh light of the operations tent. At 65, her hair was a shock of silver pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun, and the lines on her face were carved deep like a map of the Zagros Mountain range that loomed outside. She carried a weathered duffel bag and a long, rectangular rifle case that had clearly seen more action than most of the soldiers in the room. Inside, 5 elite operatives were gathered around a holographic table. Colonel Marcus Thorne, a man whose crisp uniform and self-satisfied smirk seemed immune to the surrounding dust and grit, was showcasing his unit's latest acquisition. Complete battle space awareness, Thorne announced, his voice booming with practiced authority. This scope offers thermal, infrared, and real-time atmospheric data. It practically aims for you. The age of guesswork is over. Lieutenant Leo Vance, a young officer with an eager face, leaned in. Response time, sir. Instantaneous, Thorne beamed. Pentagon's best. Ellie moved to an empty corner, setting her case down with a quiet thud. The worn metal clasps clicked open, a sound that seemed jarringly analog in the digital hum of the tent. Every head turned. The room's focus shifted from the glowing hologram to the old woman and her antiquated gear. Thorne's expression morphed from pride to condescending amusement. Our specialist support has arrived. He strode towards her, hands clasped behind his back in a parody of inspection. Staff Sergeant Vance, I presume. Yes, sir, Ellie replied, her voice steady and calm, a stark contrast to the aggressive energy in the room. Thorne's gaze dropped to her open rifle case. Inside, nestled in faded foam, lay an M24 sniper weapon system. It was immaculate, the steel and wood cared for with a meticulous devotion, but it was undeniably a weapon from a different era. They told me we were getting a specialist, Thorne announced loudly, playing to his audience. They didn't mention they were sending an exhibit from the War Museum. A wave of laughter followed his cue. A young corporal, his name tag reading Riley, snickered openly. Guess they sent my grandma to the front line, he muttered. Ellie's face remained impassive. She simply closed the case. Only one person wasn't laughing. Sergeant Aria Valdez stood slightly apart, her dark eyes studying Ellie with a quiet intensity, a professional curiosity that outweighed the cheap mockery of her teammates. Briefing is at 1800, Thorne said, dismissing Ellie as he turned back to his team. Mission is simple. Extract a high-value asset from a fortified compound. Fast and clean. With all due respect, Colonel. Ellie's voice cut through the chatter, quiet but carrying an undeniable weight. I'll take a position on the North Ridge. It provides the best overwatch of the compound and all approach routes. Thorne's eyebrows shot up. The ridge is over 2 miles out. Our new systems have an effective range of 1,500 meters. You'll be positioned with Corporal Riley on the south approach, providing secondary support, if needed. The unspoken addendum was clear. You won't be. Ellie gave a single, curt nod and returned to her corner. She began to unpack her gear with an economy of motion that spoke of thousands of repetitions. Riley, emboldened by his colonel's attitude, sauntered over. That old thing seen better days, huh? First deployment. No, Ellie said, not looking up from checking her ammunition. You always this quiet? Riley pushed. Ellie paused her work. She slowly lifted her head, and her eyes, a startlingly pale blue, calm as a frozen lake, met his. There was a depth in her gaze, a history that made the young corporal take an involuntary step back. Only when there's nothing worth saying, she said softly. Riley retreated, muttering to Leo, "What's her problem? Some people are here to do a job, not to make friends." Aria's voice interjected, level but with a note of warning. She had moved closer, observing Ellie's methodical preparation. That M24 is a classic, perfectly maintained. Ellie glanced at Arya, a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. Thank you. Most guys prefer the new stuff, Arya continued. Digital scopes, custom triggers. Most guys haven't had to rely on anything else, Ellie replied. Thorne's voice broke the moment. Valdez, equipment check. I want all systems green. As Arya moved off, Ellie continued her work, her movements a silent rebuke to the technology-obsessed culture around her. She didn't check battery levels, she checked the wind. She didn't trust a targeting computer. She trusted the practiced stillness of her own body. And in the quiet corner of the tent, surrounded by men who saw a relic, she prepared for a mission they couldn't possibly understand. The pre-dawn light was a thin, gray wash over the jagged peaks of the mountains. A biting wind whipped through the canyons as Thorne's team moved into position. They were a silent, efficient unit, communicating through encrypted comms and hand signals, their movements dictated by the GPS waypoints glowing on their wrist-mounted displays. Ellie and a reluctant Corporal Riley were positioned on the south approach, a less-than-ideal vantage point overlooking a series of rocky outcrops and dead ground. You really think that antique can hit anything from here? Riley whispered, fiddling with the settings on his own weapon, a state-of-the-art platform that looked more like a video game controller than a rifle. If needed, Ellie replied, her voice a low murmur that was almost lost in the wind. She wasn't looking at a screen. Her eyes were scanning the terrain, noting the way the dust swirled in the valley, the subtle tremble of leaves on a hardy shrub. Through their earpieces, Thorne's voice was a crisp, digital command. All units in position. Command confirms asset is in the southeast building. Breaching team, prepare to move on my mark. Area's voice followed. Perimeter security is down. We're good to G. Her voice dissolved into a burst of screeching static. Tech team, report. Thorne ordered, the first hint of tension in his voice. The only answer was a crackling hiss. The data on their displays vanished, replaced by error messages. Their night vision flickered and died. They were electronically blind. Comms failure protocol. All units, fall back to rally point Zulu. Thorne commanded, his practice comm fraying at the edges. Ellie remained perfectly still, her eye pressed to the scope of her M24. Did you hear that? Orders are to fall back. Riley hissed, his voice tight with panic. You go. Ellie said, her focus unwavering. I'll hold this position. Are you insane? That's a direct order. Ellie finally turned to look at him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. Situations change, Corporal, so do orders. Now go. Riley hesitated, then scrambled away, casting fearful glances back at the lone, motionless figure. As soon as he was gone, Ellie gathered her gear. But she didn't move toward Rally Point Zulu. She moved in the opposite direction, toward the north ridge she had recommended hours earlier. The climb was steep and treacherous, a near-vertical ascent that would have challenged a man half her age. But Ellie moved with a sure-footed grace, her body remembering landscapes like this as if they were home. Her breathing was even, her movements efficient, wasting no energy. Within 15 minutes, she reached the narrow outcropping she had identified on the map. It offered a breathtaking, unobstructed view of the entire compound. She set up with the same practiced economy, the rifle becoming an extension of her body. Settling behind the scope, she adjusted her position, her body molding to the cold rock until she was as stable as the mountain itself. Through her lens, she saw the compound explode into activity. This wasn't a simple holding facility. It was a trap. Enemy fighters poured from hidden positions, setting up a perfect kill zone aimed directly at the team's southern approach. At Rally Point Zulu, chaos reigned. Targeting systems are fried, Leo reported, his voice strained as he hammered uselessly at his console. It's like we've been firewalled from the outside. They knew we were coming, Arya said, her voice grim as she took cover behind a boulder. Gunfire erupted from the compound, a storm of lead that pinned the team down. Return fire. Thorne yelled, but their advanced weapons, now stripped of their digital assistance, were clumsy and inaccurate. Bullets ricocheted wildly around them. "Where is Vance?" Thorne roared, finally realizing the old woman wasn't among them. Riley, huddled behind a rock, stammered, She refused to fall back, sir. She stayed put." Then, a new sound cut through the cacophony. A single, heavy boom that was deeper and more deliberate than the rattle of automatic fire. It was followed by a half-second of silence, and then another, and another. Each shot was perfectly timed, a measured beat in the chaotic rhythm of the firefight. The hostile fire faltered. A machine gun nest fell silent. A sniper on a rooftop crumpled. In the sudden quiet, Ari peered through her binoculars toward the north ridge, exactly where Ellie had wanted to be. A tiny, almost invisible figure was silhouetted against the rising sun. "Impossible," Leo whispered, his voice filled with awe. "That's over 2 miles. No one makes that shot without a computer." 8 shots. Arya counted softly. 8 targets down. Blackwood stared, dumbfounded, as the figure on the ridge methodically packed up her gear and melted back into the landscape, disappearing as if she were never there. The extraction vehicle was hidden in a dry riverbed a mile from the compound. Thorne's team arrived battered, shaken, and humiliated. Their multi-million-dollar equipment was useless junk, and their confidence was shattered. As they approached the designated transport, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Ellie, her rifle case slung over her shoulder, looking as calm as if she'd just returned from a morning walk. "Vance!" Thorne stormed towards her, his face a mask of fury and confusion. "You defied a direct order. You abandoned your post. How did you?" His tirade was cut short by Arya. "Sir," she said, holding up a small, encrypted datapad that had just blinked to life. "I have an incoming message. From Joint Special Operations Command." She read the screen, her eyes widening. "Sir, Command confirms Staff Sergeant Vance has been granted operational authority. She's in command." The air crackled with stunned silence. Thorne froze, his mouth half open. The rest of the team stared, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and dawning understanding. Ellie said nothing. She simply walked to the side of the truck and unclasped her rifle case one more time. She didn't take the rifle out. She just turned the case so they could all see the weapon stock. There, expertly etched into the dark wood, was a small, distinctive symbol. A perfect crosshair with a single, 5-pointed star at its center. Thorne's face went pale. The color drained from his features as recognition, and a deep, chilling dread washed over him. "The Deadeye program," he whispered, the words barely audible. "The what?" Riley asked, looking lost. "Not what, kid? Who?" Arya explained, her voice hushed with reverence. "It was a ghost program. The most classified sniper initiative in military history. Legend says they trained 7 operatives to function when all technology fails. To make shots that were, by all calculations, mathematically impossible." Humbled, Thorne straightened up, his entire demeanor changing. He was no longer addressing a subordinate. He was addressing a legend. "Major Vance," he said, correcting her rank. I wasn't aware." "That was the point, Colonel," Ellie replied, finally meeting his gaze directly. Her pale blue eyes were like chips of ice. "This extraction was a cover. Our target wasn't the asset you were briefed on." She held up a small device she'd recovered, a signal jammer, calibrated to the unique frequencies of their specific equipment. "The real mission is to identify and neutralize a traitor within military intelligence. Someone has been feeding our operational details and tech specs to hostile forces. 3 teams have been lost in the last month because of it. And you suspected someone on my team," Thorne concluded, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "I suspected everyone," Ellie corrected coolly. "Including you." Riley stepped forward, his shock turning to indignation. "You used us as bait." "I used a controlled scenario to expose a vulnerability," Ellie replied, her voice cutting like steel. "No one was in any real danger. I had Overwatch the entire time." "Those 8 shots," Leo said slowly, the awe returning, "from 2 miles out, without any targeting assistance. The Deadeye program was never about technology," Arya explained to the others. It was about transcending it. It was about what a human is capable of when everything else breaks down. Ellie ignored the commentary. She turned to the transport vehicle, her focus already on the next objective. The leak isn't on your team, Colonel. It's higher up the chain. Someone with access to your unit's technical loadout and mission parameters. How can you be sure? Thorne asked. Because this jammer was tuned specifically to your gear's frequency signature, Ellie explained. That data isn't in a standard mission file. It requires top-level access to CENTCOM's tech archives. Someone knew I was being assigned to your team and tried to ensure we would be neutralized before I could get close to the truth. She opened the vehicle's rear door. We need to move. Phase 2 of the operation starts now. What's Phase 2? Riley asked, his head still spinning. Ellie turned, her expression grim. We're going to find the man who sold the codes. And we're going to do it the old way, without any systems they can track. The team moved north, deeper into the Zagros range, leaving the compromised grid of technology behind. Their GPS units were off, their encrypted radios silent. Their guide was Ellie, and her tools were a worn topographical map, a simple compass, and a lifetime of experience etched in her memory. The team, stripped of their digital crutches, followed her with a mixture of apprehension and newfound respect. The real target is a former military scientist, she explained as they navigated a narrow, treacherous pass. Dr. Alistair Finch. He was a key architect of your targeting systems before he faked his death in a lab accident 3 years ago. I remember that name, Leo said, jogging his memory. He was a genius. They said he was a tragic loss. He was a tragic traitor, Ellie corrected. He took the system's backdoor protocols with him. He's been selling vulnerabilities to the highest bidder, and someone inside our own command structure has been helping him. General Whitmore, Thorne said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. He personally signed off on our mission specs, which explains how the enemy knew exactly what frequencies to jam and where we'd be, Ellie confirmed. Whitmore was feeding Finch the data on which teams to target. They continued in a tense silence, the reality of the betrayal sinking in. The team watched, mesmerized as Ellie worked. She read the terrain like a book, tracked unseen trails, and navigated by the position of the sun. It was a masterclass in skills they had only read about in history books. Riley, who had struggled to keep pace, leaned against a rock, gasping for air. We train for urban ops, not this. The enemy chooses the battlefield that gives them the advantage, Ellie replied without slowing. Our job is to adapt. That's not a Deadeye principle. It's common sense. By late afternoon, she led them to a hidden facility carved into the mountainside, a secret laboratory so perfectly camouflaged it was invisible until they were 20 feet from the entrance. A single, bored-looking guard stood watch. Standard breach? Thorne asked, instinctively reaching for his sidearm. Ellie shook her head. We need him alive and quiet. She moved with a fluid stealth that defied her age, circling above the entrance. The team watched as she produced a simple blowpipe and a small dart. With a soft puff of air, the dart flew and struck the guard in the neck. He collapsed without a sound. Tranquilizer, she explained as they secured the man. He'll sleep for an hour. Let's move. Inside, they found Dr. Finch surrounded by a web of servers and monitors. He was a thin, nervous man who surrendered the moment he saw Ellie, his face crumbling with the realization that his protectors had failed him. You were supposed to be a decoy, he stammered. Whitmore said your team would be eliminated. Plans change, Ellie said coolly. While Leo and Riley secured the scientist, Thor and Arya helped Ellie search the lab. They found everything. Schematics, communication logs, and a list of compromised operations that accounted for dozens of casualties. Arya connected a small, non-digital device to Finch's main computer, physically overriding its security. Transfer records, she announced, her face grim. Payments from offshore accounts, all linked back to shell corporations owned by General Whitmore. As they gathered the damning evidence, Ellie found a separate encrypted file. A video. It showed General Whitmore meeting with Finch, promising him protection in exchange for a new project. Fully autonomous combat drones. This is why you were sent, Thorne realized. watching the footage. Not just for Finch, but to stop this. Ellie nodded. The Deadeye program was officially shut down. But some threats can't be handled by machines. Some shots still need a human touch. With the evidence secured and Finch in custody, they began the long trek back. At the temporary base camp, as they cleaned their gear, Riley approached Ellie, his M24 in hand. "Major," he said, his voice hesitant but respectful. Could you show me how you calculate for wind drift without a computer?" Ellie offered the barest hint of a smile. "First lesson, Corporal. Technology is a tool, not a crutch. It breaks. A good soldier adapts." Later, Thorne found her staring out at the mountains. "Major, I owe you an apology," he said formally. "I judged you by your age and your equipment. I was wrong. A common mistake, Colonel," Ellie replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The enemy was counting on it. The good ones learned from it. A new sense of purpose settled over the team. They were no longer just operators. They were students. As Ellie laid out a physical map for their next move, transporting the evidence and the prisoner, the others gathered around, watching, listening, and for the first time, truly learning. The weapon, they now understood, was only as good as the person holding it. This journey proves that true strength isn't forged in the newest technology, but in the unwavering steel of human experience. It's found in the instincts that can't be coded and the wisdom that can't be downloaded. In an age that worships the algorithm, it's a powerful reminder that our oldest skills, patience, observation, and adaptation, remain our most indispensable assets. Have you ever underestimated someone based on their age or appearance, only to be proven completely wrong? What went through your mind when you saw Colonel Thorne and his team mocking Ellie at the beginning? And in your own life, do you think it's more important to trust in cutting-edge technology or in the time-tested wisdom that comes from experience? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If this story about the triumph of wisdom and respect resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of unsung heroes. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded to never, ever judge a book by its cover. We read and appreciate every single comment you leave for us. More stories about legendary veterans are waiting for you right on your screen. Click to watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow with a brand new story about an underestimated genius who saved the day. See you then.